Welcome, friends. That was Harold Moses playing a composition that he wrote and conceived of. And it is of a quality that can make us move into these energies, acknowledging the tests, trials, and triumph of the disciples uh, on the physical plane, the emotional plane, and the mental plane. So as we move forward in this consideration of ideas, ideals, and illusions, and we gather our impressions, let's think today in Scorpio. And the image that is the background is actually a Tuli sculpture that has traveled around the world as part of a larger exhibition. And I first photographed it, I think, 15 years ago in Texas when the boat was sitting on a lake and there was a different quality. And then a friend of mine went to the exhibition in Seattle, and it was in a dark museum where all the light was shining on this boat. And it makes me always remember the mantra that is sounded uh, or regularly sounded by those who study Master Dwell Kul. Into the light we move, beckoned thereto by thee. Out of the dark we come, driven thereto by the soul of all. Up from the earth we spring, and into the ocean of light we plunge. Together we come, together we move, guided and led by the soul we serve, and by thee. The Master within and the Master without are one. That one are we, the one is all. My soul, thy soul, the Master and the soul of all. And as I look at the different figures, the sculptures in the boat, I think about the great diversity of humanity and how we're being called on at this time to live in the light, to be in the light of day in Scorpio. So we'll look at the rules of thought today in relation to some basic teachings on Scorpio. And I hope that as we move forward, you will bring forth to the group some teaching on Scorpio in particular that you think is important for the group to weave into our impressions, bring into our impressions as a light on the physical, etheric, or the emotional, or the mental plane as we move forward together. So we'll look at some of the rules of thought, and we'll look at what has been shared to this point and add to it in relation to those rules. As we endeavor to dispel illusion, for that is the great illusion, as well as our individual illusions that we operate under. Along this way, as we seek to open the door and take the next steps along the path of initiation. Scorpio is a triple sign. Virgo and Scorpio are the triple signs. And we think about this great constellation, this zodiacal sign. And Ben, would you read this slide as it unfolds?
Scorpio is a triple sign. Scorpio is the great constellation which influences the turning point, both in the life of humanity and the life of the individual human being. For the first time in the history of both mankind and disciples, the energy of Sirius, pouring into the 7 groups which form our planetary hierarchy, evokes a response. I, the Master, would remind you of a basic fact in the evolutionary process, which astrology will eventually prove scientifically and past all controversy. This is the fact that energies and forces are pouring upon our system and our planetary lives ceaselessly, potently, and cyclically. Yet they are only regarded today as existing when definite response is evoked. They come from all kinds of sources, extraneous to our system and planetary schemes. But until man responds and registers them, both scientists and astrologers fail to recognize these energies and forces, and it is as if they were not. This is a point to bear in mind as I continue to teach you, for I may indicate some sources of active energy which may as yet be unknown to you, as playing upon our system and its contents. The difficulty will not be because of my inaccuracies, but will be owing to the lack of sensitivity in the mechanism of response which mankind and disciples are at present utilizing.
Helen.
The divine triplicity. We can express this truth. God, the Father, the will to manifest, initiates the creative process, which is worked out through the activity of God the Son, the cosmic Christ, crucified upon the fixed cross in the heavens. The activity of God the Holy Spirit, implicit in the mutable cross, is closely allied to the previous solar system, and the energy of that divine aspect is practically entirely occupied with manipulating the forces inherited from that system and inherent in the very nature of substance itself. This divine aspect is to the whole general divine manifestation. This divine aspect is to the whole general divine manifestation what the lower nature, form life, or personality in the three worlds of human evolution is to the soul, where an individual human being is concerned.
So let's breathe into this great, immense concept of triplicity, and Scorpio being the sign, a triple sign, the sign of this triplicity, and knowing that there are great energies coming into the system that we cannot recognize, we cannot know, we cannot yet comprehend. But then consider humanity as the world disciple in the sign of Scorpio. And think about the will to manifest this creative process that's being worked through the consciousness aspect, the cosmic Christ, crucified upon the fixed cross in the heavens. And how do we consider in Scorpio understanding fully what the word crucified means, because it has such a connotation in Greco-Roman evolution and in the evolution of the religion of Christianity, that there's a deep, buried understanding in the human consciousness of this test and a trial that leads to a triumph. And let's consider for ourselves the activity of the Holy Spirit, the majority of humanity on the mutable cross, and this activity being implicit in that cross. That Scorpio is rising and is on the fixed cross. So it's a completely, it's a huge shift, a huge change. Let's keep that in mind as we move along. So can you recognize the centers in your own being, the centers that are being integrated and controlled by the soul? We think about humanity as one of these larger triangles and being in relationship in that triangle to the hierarchy and Shambhala. Let's consider for ourselves finding the triplicity that you are discovering in Scorpio. Which triangle in all these interrelated triangles is your personal individual focus in Scorpio? The triangle that is bringing for you the tests, the trials, and eventual triumph. For Master Dwell Kul tells us, know thyself. Are you in the process of integration of the three lower bodies, physical, emotional, and mental, and working with the soul vehicle so that the mind will control and the soul will control? Are you working within the soul vehicle itself? Is your focus the causal body, the opening of the vortices of the egoic lotus? Are you experiencing the flashes of intuition from the spiritual triad? Let's think now of the groups that we are working with. How are we bringing the gifts of these tests and trials into the group work? Through our thoughts. How are we aligning with the new group of world servers, the one world serving group? And where is the world serving group in relation to, we think of it as that creative ajna center at one lower point of a triangle, connecting with the hierarchy and with Shambhala? Are you working with that triplicity? And what of the nation in which you live? The soul of that nation. What is that nation discovering? What triplicity is that nation focused on? Is that nation receiving soul impulse and consciousness, and integrating its three lower bodies is the nation acting as a unified physical, etheric, emotional, and mental body under the impress of the soul of the nation. And then we can also think about the triplicity of humanity itself. Humanity's etheric physical body, humanity's astral emotional body, humanity's mental body in all creative activities. How are those bodies being integrated? We're in the fifth root race, and humanity's goal to lift the creative intelligence into that highest point of concrete science and knowledge. How is humanity bringing that duplicity into a unity to be able to rise? Just some things you may consider as we move forward with this great idea of thought and consciousness on all levels, considering the triplicity, Scorpio as a triple sign. Frida.
Scorpio, the light of day. This is the place where the three lights meet. The light of form, the light of soul, and the light of life. They meet, they blend, they rise. Integration is both physical in nature and an attitude of mind. The consciousness of the man is gradually aroused so that it recognizes the relation of the part to the whole, with implied interrelation of all parts within the whole.
So going back to the focus on a triangle and this notion of integration. Consider how you will, as an individual and in group work, focus on integration. Integration of the light of form, the light of the soul, and the light of life. And see the interrelation of all parts within the whole. Heike.
Fourth rule of thought, discover that thou hast a mind and learn its dual use. In Scorpio, the mind is released into full governing activity. This release takes place in two stages. Stage 1, wherein the intellect becomes dominant and powerful and controls eventually the emotional nature. Third rule of thought, control the body of emotion, for the waves that rise upon the stormy seas of life engulf the swimmer, shut out the sun, and render all plans futile. Stage 2, wherein the intellect is illumined by the light of the soul. In dealing with probationary disciples and with ordinary humanity, the service of humanity would do well to remember these two stages and not confuse them as they attempt to aid those who are in one or other of them. The emphasis is laid upon the struggle of the personality to release itself from the grip of the lower desire in the first case, and in the second, to release itself from surrounding world glamour, which is revealed when soul light is thrown into it via the reflecting and illumined mind. In stage 1, the power of the trained reasoning and rationalizing mind is called into activity by the soul. The trained reasoning and rationalizing mind is called into activity by the soul. In the other, stage 2, the illumination of the soul must pour into the mind and is then reflected like a searchlight onto the astral plane.
If we're considering our individual progress, contemplate for just a moment how your personality integration and beginning soul fusion shows up in group formation. Where we do experience ourselves, or we know in the experience shared by others of the struggle of the personality to release itself from the grip of lower desire. And we also see in ourselves and in others the glamours and how world glamour is affecting not only individuals but groups. And as we work in group, then the soul light is thrown into it, onto it. And it does reveal this ever more reflecting and ever more illumined mind. Have you, in your group activities, been able to reach that highest level of abstract mind illumination and be able to visualize that light growing and then being directed through the principle of directed purpose, the will aspect, onto the astral plane? With complete impersonality. Remember an instance in your own experience where you've either observed this in your own group or you've observed it from your own experience onto the astral plane. and lift right now to a point of that blended light of matter and brain and light of mind that merges, and the immediate downpouring of soul light to merge to the triple light. And move into the group mind, where that triple light becomes the great searchlight. Which is then turned and directed through an act of the will and an act of penetration. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the world glamour of selfish acquisition, limiting freedom of choice. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of that world glamour. With power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of selfish acquisition, limiting freedom of choice. With power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the world glamour of selfish acquisition, limiting freedom of choice. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om, carrying the directed purpose. Mani, focusing the light. Padme, bringing in the power of the soul. Om, unifying into an indivisible beam of light, which has the power to prevent the appearance, to negate the quality, and to destroy the life behind the world glamour of selfish acquisition, limiting freedom of choice. So we use our illumined minds for the benefit of humanity. Master DK says, let us keep in mind as we consider these teachings particularly in Scorpio, the potency of the thought forms which have been built up in connection with the 12 signs. These thought forms were originally constructed or anchored upon the mental plane by the hierarchy in Atlantean days, and they have steadily gained in power ever since. They serve as focal points for certain forces and enable the individual, for instance, to be in touch with great reservoirs of energy, which then definitely condition him. I might suggest in this time that we need to consider that moving on the abstract plane, we need to consider what thoughts related to the myths of Scorpio need to be blotted out in the light of day as we move into the Aquarian age. And what thoughts related to Scorpio need to rise in the light of day. Allow some time in the week coming, and as you hear and listen to the different teachings that will be shared related to Scorpio, how those work through this notion of the shift in the mental plane now, out of the Atlantean consciousness into what is going to be an Aquarian consciousness, and what in those thought forms needs to fall away in the light of day, and then what emerges as the phoenix rising in the light of day. And so we're going to continue our exploration of the ideas and the ideals and the illusions and the rules of thought, and focus on these key words, because if we recall a few weeks ago, the word, the idea of listening, that should guide every interaction as we consider and as we think, listening into finding the essence, and then the ideas that we touch, the ideals that we touch, the potential intuition that we touch, so that we can see, apply, and know. And when we know, then, as disciples and initiates on that higher level, to then experiment, to express, with the expectation that we will have a revelation. So DK calls this the cosmic story. And it is a simple and yet useful way to consider how we move forward together. So Ben, let's continue with the rules.
Concentrate the thinking principle and be the master of thy mental world. The rules are recognized by those for whom they exist, and hence evoke from them a prompt, intuitive response. 3 tiers of vortices or petals in the causal body, the egoic lotus. Rules are put to trial in the belief that the witness of the past and the testimony of the ages warrant the effort required for the expressed requirement.
So, what, as that rule is read or was read, becomes the prompt intuitive response, knowing that that prompt intuitive response is part of, coming from, or downloaded from these three tiers or vortices and petals in the causal body, the knowledge, love, and sacrifice petals on each tier. This is where the thinking principle resides. What is your prompt intuitive response to this rule? Is it in response to the 5 knowledge petals, the 5 love petals, or possibly the 5 sacrifice petals? What do you touch intuitively? Thoughts of sacrifice, thoughts of the expression of higher love, pure reason, thoughts of the knowledge, those 5 knowledge petals. Can you visualize a triplicity of those vortices through which your thoughts emerge? If something comes to you in your meditation and contemplation in the coming week that you'd like to share, please share it with the group, and we'll proceed to integrate this rule into the sharings that have now been put into a text form and sort of depersonalized from our previous dialogues. So let's read these, and as we listen, let us touch that intuitive level and see if we can come forth with some additional contributions in relation to these sharings from our previous dialogues. Ellen, would you read this for us, please?
Yes. We listen, touch, and see points from group dialogue and sharing. Thoughts are going to be this combination of mind, soul, and will. Breath. Because one cannot be without the other. You cannot separate them at all, even though we try to with our words. And when I think of, for example, communication, we have to use our minds to find words to express the thought, to find those symbols in our language which translate what we want to bring out. We have to use our voice. And the voice is the quality part, the quality aspect. Because without the sound, the voice, no one would understand you. The clothing of sound adding to the meaning. Intonation, pitch, rhythm. Otherwise, we would just have a fact. And you need the breath, because it's only the breath on which you can get it out there and send the communication, the sound, the vibration that is uniquely yours, your note, your understanding, your truth from your mind into the field of experience for others.
The will on the breath. Bringing in expression. We remember the words as we listen, touch, see, and eventually know we're expressing into the field. It's beautiful sharing from our group. Heike.
In viewing the world of thought, I find myself drawn to the teachings as I try to bring an impression into a thought form that I can then express. This excerpt brings some assurance about the distortions of day-to-day experience. The veil of illusion resembles the moment before dawn, when the world of familiar things is seen through the fogs, and the streamers of mist which veil the world form and also veil the rising sun. Then we have that half time, that mysterious and vague period when the real is hidden by the unreal. Then we have that weird and distorted condition when forms are not seen as they truly are, but lose their shape and color and perspective. True vision, then, is impossible. From Treatise on White Magic, page 613. How do you separate the false from the true? Rule 1 of the Rules of Thought. We continue to study, experience, and orient using the attitude and the altitude of the observer to achieve increasing impersonality. One way that the Tibetan master suggests is the evening review, taking time each day to review one's responses to the unreal experiences and events of the day, of the family, the community, the world, and sort out responses or reactions that are signs of attachment, glamour, and lead one to find the next illusion to shatter. What is truth?
Ben.
What is truth? Rules are put to trial in the belief that the witness of the past and the testimony of the ages warrant the effort required for the expressed requirements. It may be that there is no pure truth in the world that we inhabit, and therefore not a universal truth to which all of humanity can agree. We study the ageless wisdom and arrive at some sense of the golden thread that can be tracked back in the writings and teachings of the ancients, and then arrive at a kind of truth to apply in our lives, to guide our actions, to create statements that we agree need to be the foundation of our unreal lives, like peace, justice, compassion, all the ideals we express. The international organizations like the United Nations have brought thinkers and leaders together to formulate international laws, guiding principles, to put some guardrails on the behavior of nations and activist groups seeking to control territory and peoples. Students of the ageless wisdom meet to reflect on archetypes, myths, stories, past civilizations, to find agreement on the great truths.
Frida. I'll go ahead. We listen, touch, see. In this sharing, the group could relate to their own experience of meeting the demands of the moment in ordinary life, whatever that might be. And by, quote, the registering by the mind and subsequently by the brain of the eternal verities, and the indication that the race is beginning also to bridge the gap between the objective and the subjective, between the world of form and the world of ideas. We each have daily lives, work, group service that brings us into relationship with the higher truth that we can then discern and act upon. So the keynote of this sharing is sometimes it is just about being conscious of where one is. This is kind of an adaptation of the sharing that was given to us. Everything that we just proceeded with, the excerpts and the orientation to thought that we were using, brought a flow of thought and recognition into the daily experience that's foremost in the life of this individual at this point. And she says, it's foremost in my life right now. And I mean that in recognizing the experience that I am standing within at any and every moment, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, bringing true awareness to the moment, sharing the soul virtues, apparently with others, and knowing it is truly about becoming the teachings in action. Catching myself being, in this case, mean in response to a situation, I had immediately the recognition that the demand was to be selfless, and then could, with a smile, looking to the higher soul guidance and recognizing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, that energetically I was in the place where I was supposed to be. And to have that recognition and then be able to spend that next day in silent meditation, to actually walk and be in that right place where that soul focus was aligned with pure motive and intention, could turn my thoughts away from any focus on my personal needs for home, for the familiar, or into the needs of the moment, rather, caring for others and supporting them in achieving the tasks that needed to be done. As we move forward in Scorpio, let us remind ourselves every day that we are exactly where we are supposed to be. And the demands of that environment are the field of experience in which we bring the rules of thought into action with soul guidance. Ellen.
We listen, touch, and see points from the group dialogue and sharing in viewing the world of thought. The second rule. What is the meaning of illusion? What is our perception of the golden thread of truth? To perceive the golden thread, we can build into daily practice the use of the sacred mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. A group member shared this teaching from the Dalai Lama and the thought of embodying total altruism. Quote, recite the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, and while you are doing it, you should be thinking on its meaning. For the meaning of the 6 syllables is great and vast. The first Om symbolizes the practitioner's impure body, speech, and mind. It also symbolizes the pure, exalted body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. The path is indicated by the next 4 syllables. Mani, meaning jewel, symbolizes the factors of method, the altruistic intention to become enlightened, compassion, and love. The 2 syllables, Padme, means lotus and symbolize wisdom. Purity must be achieved by an indivisible unity of method and wisdom, symbolized by the final syllable, hum, which indicates indivisibility. Thus, the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum, mean that in dependence on the practice of a path, which is indivisible union of method and wisdom, you can transform your impure body, speech, and mind into the pure, exalted body, speech, and mind of a Buddha.
So this fits so beautifully with that dual nature of the mind that we consider in the 2 stages in Scorpio. And another group member offered that this is indeed, this mantra is even beyond this interpretation and is used in a greater occult sense. The Om signifying the purpose, the great purpose of the planetary logos. The Mani, the recognition of light in every syllable, every symbol, every atom, light pervading all. Padme, the recognition of consciousness or soul in all, in every single united, synthesized level of consciousness, from the mineral kingdom to the consciousness of the planetary logos and beyond. And Om, that absolute unity, the non-separateness, the indivisibility. So we had a great opportunity to really begin to understand and utilize this, leading us along that golden thread of truth. Heike.
Scorpio is under the influence or inflowing energy of Sirius. This is the great star of initiation, because our hierarchy, an expression of the second aspect of divinity, is under the supervision or spiritual magnetic control of the hierarchy of Sirius. Sirius, the star of sensitivity, is governing the hierarchy. These are the major controlling influences whereby the cosmic Christ works upon the Christ principle in the solar system, in the planet, in man, and in the lower forms of life expression. It is esoterically called the brilliant star of sensitivity.
So if in considering a triplicity, as we did when we began, what came to your mind was the triangle of Shambhala, hierarchy, and humanity, we know that under this sign of Scorpio, humanity is receiving in our solar system the energies through Mars. And in this particular period, the energies moving into the hierarchy are illuminating through the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, enabling the hierarchy to transmit into and through the new group of world servers for humanity, a new kind of sensitivity, a higher level of potential transmutation that involves the cosmic Christ and the Christ principle in our solar system and the center of the heart of our planetary being in the hierarchy, coming down into humanity as a whole. The potential for this new sensitivity, transmuting the old and purifying. All who hold that spark of what will be the new world religion and hold that spark in the expressions of spiritual values in all of the institutions, the nations, the organizations, to open through the sixth ray and the fourth ray. The fourth ray coming in now, harmony through conflict. And build this stream of an enlightened sensitivity through the qualities of the sixth ray and the fourth ray. Purifying. And we turn those energies into our work to dissipate glamour and dispel illusion. So let's, in the coming week, contemplate the soul in relation to thought. Rita, are you able to read at this point?
Yes. The soul in relation to thought. Firstly, only the soul has a direct and clear understanding of the creative purpose and our plan. Secondly, only the soul whose nature is intelligent love can be trusted with the knowledge, the symbols, and the formulas which are necessary to the correct conditioning of the magical work. Thirdly, only the soul has power to work in all three worlds at once, and yet remain detached, and therefore karmically free from the results of such work. Fourthly, only the soul is truly group conscious and actuated by pure unselfish purpose. And number 5, only the soul with the open eye of vision can see the end from the beginning and can hold in steadiness the true picture of the ultimate consummation.
This is also from a treatise on white magic and relates us to, as DK does in his teachings, we watch the numerology, and these 5 points relate us to the 5 petals or vortices in the egoic lotus, in which we are receiving and opening and beginning to unveil the true nature of the soul as our sole purpose. So that is one way to think about these, to contemplate them in relation to your thoughts and the rules of thought. Another way to consider them is to contemplate them in relation to the group in which you are most affiliated, the group to which you are dedicating your service at this time. And contemplate that service in relation to these rules or these concepts, to bring the soul into full recognition in your service work. And what you bring then to that group and that group service. Another way to contemplate them is in relation to the nation, if you are working with the soul of your nation. So as DK says, bringing these ideas, these thoughts into consciousness, and then expressing them into the minds of humanity, however you are doing that, in group formation or in your individual service project. That's the goal. And that is a great service. We're given 6 words for disciples. And let's correlate them to listen, touch, see, apply, know, and express. And cycle the words through your contemplative process. Cycle the words to a higher point every day. 1, recollection, resulting in concentration. 2, response, resulting in an interaction between higher and lower. For us, we'll look for that interaction between the higher abstract mind and the lower concrete mind. Radiation, resulting in that sounding forth, that hearing the note and on the breath, sounding forth the radiatory quality of the soul. 4, respiration, the breath, inhalation and exhalation, invocation and evocation, resulting in creative work, the will brought into activity. Reunion, resulting in at-one-ment, creating the opportunity for a new sense and sensitivity in at-oneing each day, resulting in reorientation, resulting in a clear vision of the plan. Listen, touch, see, apply, know, express. Heike.
Let us sound together as one group the mantra of the disciples' degree. May the energy of the divine self inspire us, and the light of the soul direct. May we be led from darkness to light, from the unreal to the real, from death to immortality.
We'll continue on November 8th. I believe that's the date. And it will be at a kind of adjusted time that we'll come up with based on the feedback from our group members. And we'll continue considering the rules of thought and incorporating the group members' feedback. And we have more in relation to rules 6 and 7. We'll continue this process of opening to the energies of Scorpio. So if in the coming week you encounter a teaching or a sharing on Scorpio that you are integrating into your process of consciousness, developing consciousness, and dealing with these rules, please share it. Blessings as we continue together.